riots erupted on the streets of Southport last night, following a knife attack on Monday, which left 3 girls dead and other young children in a critical condition.
The latest intelligence data revealing a surge in the number of young people who support terrorist attacks and extremist causes.
They leave us alone. That's it. We need to live like everybody in this world.
Hi, I'm Meredith. Welcome to this video essay about how media influences hate crime and extremism. In this video, I'll explore how media, especially social media, influences hate crimes and extremism. I'll be using the 2024 Southport stabbings as a case study. I'll also examine how the UK's moral panic contributed to the public responses, and how the news media coverages amplified extremist views, leaving the victims of the tragedy forgotten. In Australia, hate crimes are offences motivated by hate towards someone's race, religion, or other protected characteristics. Extremism involves using or supporting violence to achieve ideological, religious, or political goals. However, these definitions may vary across contexts. There is a common belief that hate crimes or extremism are created on social media platforms. However, social media is more used as a tool to organize and spread motivations for engaging in hate crimes and extremist ideologies. Furthermore, political discussions that occur on social media and other platforms are often used to disguise racist and extremist views, making them appear more subtle and normalized. Political fragmentation on X demonstrated that users with extremist views were the least likely to interact with other groups online, sort of putting themselves in an echo chamber. Those with extremist ideals enter these online spaces and possibly feel emboldened by others holding similar opinions, leading them to take action. Also, social media companies profit from algorithms that maximize user engagement, making hate speech and extremism reduction efforts inefficient. This is best seen through the case of YouTube, having received several critiques for lackluster attempts at reducing hate speech and primarily removing creators' ability to obtain monetization from videos, rather than removing them. However, it's not only YouTube that has this issue. Hate speech on X was consistently 50% higher for 8 months after Elon Musk had purchased it, despite initial promises to reduce it. Furthermore, free speech absolutist spaces such as 4chan enable widespread hate without fear of consequence due to user anonymity and low speech restrictions, allowing for posts supporting for the abuse of women, transphobia, anti-Semitism, and white nationalism. Following Elon Musk's removal of content moderators in 2022, there had been growing concerns that the modern social media platforms could become like 4chan. Even before social media, traditional media's role has been co-opted by groups to incite hate and violence. For example, during the 1994 Rwandan genocide, radio stations spread propaganda supporting violence against the Tutsi people, stating that participation in these attacks was preferred and deemed necessary for self-defense. Additionally, the 24/7 nature of the modern news reporting, those within the industry are utilizing sensationalized titles or images to attract more engagement, kind of like the intro to this video. Media agencies display some of Duke's news values in their approaches to right-wing extremism and its relationship to hate crime. They tend to simplify dynamics and focus on violent spectacles done to further conservative values. Also, Richards, Smith, and Barton highlighted how televised interviews of far-right individuals before and after they committed acts of violence drew significant criticism. This is because it provided these individuals with an uncritical platform while they could mold their ideology to be easily digestible to wide audiences, a method used by the far right to recruit others to the cause. On July 29, 2024, 3 young girls, B.B. King, Elsie Stancombe, and Alice De Silva Aguiar, were tragically killed in a stabbing at a Taylor Swift-themed dance event in Southport. The attacker, 17-year-old Axa Rudakabana, was initially misidentified on social media, stating that he was a Muslim asylum seeker who arrived in the UK by boat in 2023. He was, in fact, originally born in Cardiff to Rwandan immigrant parents. The initial media reaction of national feelings of shock and devastation quickly spiraled into public outrage amongst anti-immigration groups. This misinformation, especially pushed by the fake news site Channel 3 Now, spread rapidly due to its realistic appearance, playing off the public's innate trust and ideas of reliability of news sources. Within a couple of hours, riots began outside a mosque in Southport, as a result of the established social condition of xenophobic attitudes towards refugees, immigrants, and Muslims within the UK. This became a textbook moral panic, which the media contributed to. Panic escalated through 5 stages. Stage 1. A group or event is perceived to be a threat to societal values or interests. This particular group, or folk devils in this case, are refugees and immigrants, typically of the Muslim faith. Conservative British politicians tend to frame the group as a threat to British societal values by using dehumanizing language and declaring them a danger to public safety due to associations with criminal activity. For example, Suella Braverman, who was the Home Secretary for the Conservatives from 2022 to 2023, described the increase in migration as a hurricane of migrants and associated immigrants with the work of criminal gangs.
The wind of change that carried my own parents across the globe in the 20th century was a mere gust compared to the hurricane that is coming.
Some 40,000 people have arrived on the south coast this year alone, many of them facilitated by criminal gangs, some of them actual members of criminal gangs. So let's stop pretending that they are all refugees in distress. The whole country knows that that is not true.
This is a clear example of penal populism. Suella Braverman demonstrates the Conservative government's law and order approach to illegal immigration into the UK, due to building public concerns over the previous lack of restrictions placed on migration. Furthermore, these policies politicise the British public's fear of crime through carefully chosen language and speeches promoted across media platforms to justify harsh immigration policies. However, research data illustrated that the immigrant population increased simultaneously with a strong decline in criminal offences over 15 years. Stage 2. The threat is exaggerated or sensationalised by the media. This is best seen in the media coverage of Muslim grooming gangs. Cockbain and Tufail highlight a substantial example in The Times, a right-wing broadsheet owned by Murdoch News International, which ran an expose on a crime wave of Pakistani heritage men abusing white British girls, emphasizing authorities failing to act over fears of being labelled racist. However, this portrayal relied on anecdotes, opinions, and the use of limited statistics. The journalist behind the story, Andrew Norfolk, was investigated for breach of journalistic standards of conduct and ethics, removing his ability to be impartial. Moreover, the media's emphasis on the offender's heritage made the public associate this background or culture as dangerous or criminal, often using the significant Rotherham case as evidence for their assumptions. Stage 3. Public concern escalates rapidly or disproportionately. The concern became so loud that former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak adopted a stop the boats policy on asylum seekers, echoing Tony Abbott's harsh stance. Bonansinger and Forrest highlight how the Conservative Party uses softened and neutral language to propose the Rwanda policy, where illegal immigrants are not permitted to enter the UK and are relocated to Rwanda. Consequently, more radical right ideologies are repackaged as common sense, which occurs across all media types, including social media. Therefore, it's difficult for moderators to detect such speech as extremist or harmful. Stage 4. Authorities respond with urgency or punitive measures. Following the riots, the UK government took a quick, punitive approach for those arrested for the participation of violence that spread across the country. Rioters who were arrested were processed and sentenced quickly to send a message to others. Unfortunately, this response didn't address the underlying anger, it actually made people more entrenched in their extremist beliefs. Stage 5. Panic fades, but has lasting consequences. The initial panic about the riots subsided, but the underlying tensions and sentiments remained. Communities of immigrants, refugees, and Muslims are left forever changed, resulting in them having justified feelings of increased victimization in their own country. The lack of addressing the underlying social reasoning for the political tensions, paired with the swift punitive response, resulted in those who supported the riots feeling more entrenched in their views. The stabbings felt like proof that the moral panic was justified due to the misinformation. Furthermore, the government's punitive response created feelings of righteousness and sentiments that the riot participants were victims of government persecution and infringement of their right to protest. In this case, it was in fact not within their rights. UK law only protects peaceful protests. As soon as the violence began at the first riot, it was no longer legally protected. Additionally, there are long-term political consequences because dealing with the riots becomes a political minefield for the government. Participants that are not dealt with quickly and punitively, criticisms of neglecting the affected communities and the victims then rise. However, suppose they condemn the offender's actions without holding a conservative stance on immigration. In that case, then they are accused of permitting dangerous people into the country, even if the idea is due to the misinformation. what is the most upsetting is that the victims were forgotten, due to the media's focus on reports of violence and individuals co-opting the tragedy to further their own political ideology. Finally, to reduce the media's contribution to hate crime and extremism, I recommend the following. Enforcing media gag orders for ongoing criminal cases, especially for cases involving minors. Train social media moderators to identify subtle extremist content or speech better. Better acknowledgement from the government for societal reasonings for creating and escalating social tensions, such as the unfounded link between crime and immigration. Educating, especially young people, in media literacy and building critical analysis skills. And introducing stricter penalties for news outlets spreading misinformation. The Southport case study demonstrates how easily media amplifies misinformation, the politicization of fear goes unchecked, and engagement is prioritized over truth. Thanks for watching! Remember to stay critical of what you see online. It matters more than you know.